The morning sun reflected off the glass walls of Elite Aviation's showroom in Geneva, Switzerland. Kang Do-han stepped out of his black Mercedes, adjusting his navy blue suit. At 42 years old, he had built his technology company from nothing into a $20 billion enterprise. Today, he planned to buy his first private jet. Do-han looked at his watch. Exactly 10 o'clock a.m. He was right on time for his appointment. The showroom ahead sparkled with luxury. Through the clear glass walls, he could see several model aircraft displays and elegant meeting areas. A young woman sat at the front desk, typing on her computer. Her nameplate read Kim Yuri. She looked up as Do-han entered, and her smile froze slightly. Do-han had seen that look many times before. The slight confusion, the quick up-and-down glance at his clothes, the uncertain welcome in her eyes. "Good morning," Do-han said clearly. "I have an appointment with Mr. Park Jin-woo at 10 o'clock a.m. I'm here about the Gulfstream G650. Yuri blinked twice. "I'm sorry, sir. Could you repeat the name of your appointment?" "Park Jin-woo," Do-han said patiently. "I'm Kang Do-han, CEO of Quantum Dynamics. We spoke on the phone last week." Before Yuri could respond, a tall man in a gray suit walked briskly into the lobby. Park Jin-woo had sharp features and carefully styled hair. He looked around the room, checking his phone, apparently searching for someone. "Mr. Park," Do-han called out. "I'm Kang Do-han." Park turned, and his eyebrows rose slightly. He walked over, his steps slower now. "Mr. Kang, was it? You're here about the Gulfstream?" "Yes," Do-han replied. "We discussed the specifications last week." Park's mouth formed a tight smile. "I see. Well, there must be some confusion. The G650 is our premium aircraft. The starting price is $65 million. Perhaps I could show you some of our smaller options." Do-han had built his fortune by staying calm in difficult moments. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his business card, holding it out. "I'm very interested in the G650, Mr. Park. My company, Quantum Dynamics, has been looking to expand our transportation capabilities." Park took the card reluctantly. His eyes widened as he read it. Quantum Dynamics was one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the world. Do-han could see the man's mental calculations happening, the quick shift from dismissal to realization. "Oh, Mr. Kang, I apologize for the confusion." Park's voice changed completely, becoming warm and friendly. Please come this way. We have a private viewing area for our premium clients." As they walked through the showroom, Do-han noticed other employees watching. Some whispered to each other. At a desk near the back, a young woman with round glasses looked up from her computer. Her nameplate identified her as Lead Mai-rae, technical advisor. Mai-rae's eyes lit up with recognition. Unlike the others, her surprise seemed genuine and positive. "Mr. Kang, I attended your keynote speech at the Tech Summit in Seoul last year. Your work on quantum computing is revolutionary." Park Jin-woo frowned at the interruption. "Ms. Lee, please return to your work. Mr. Kang and I have important matters to discuss." Do-han noticed Mai-rae's enthusiasm fade as she nodded and turned back to her computer. He made a mental note of her name and reaction. In his experience, the way people behaved when they thought no one important was watching often revealed their true character. They entered a luxurious meeting room with model aircraft displayed in glass cases. Park gestured to a leather chair. "Please sit. Would you like coffee? Water? Champagne, perhaps?" "Water is fine," Do-han said, sitting down. He noticed how Park's attitude had shifted completely now that he understood who Do-han was. The same man who had suggested smaller options moments ago was now practically bowing. As Park went to get water, Do-han took out his phone and made a brief note. He had recorded everything since entering the building. Standard practice for all his business dealings. But today's recordings would serve a larger purpose. Park returned with water and a thick folder of documents. Now, Mr. Kang, let me tell you about the magnificent G650. It's our most prestigious aircraft, perfect for a man of your newfound position. Du-Han noticed the slight emphasis on newfound. Even now, Park couldn't help himself. Please, Du-Han said calmly, tell me about the engine specifications first. For the next hour, Park presented the aircraft's features. He frequently checked his phone, sending quick messages. Du-Han suspected he was having someone verify quantum dynamics financials. Every few minutes, Park's tone would shift between condescending and overly friendly. The morning light moved across the room as they talked. Through the glass walls, Du-Han could see Kim Yuri at her desk, occasionally glancing their way. Lee Mi-rae had moved to a different desk, but she too looked over sometimes, her expression thoughtful. Du-Han asked detailed technical questions about the aircraft. Each time Park struggled to answer, he would laugh nervously and say something like, well, for someone new to private aviation, these details can be quite complex. I studied aerospace engineering before moving into computing, Du-Han mentioned casually. He enjoyed watching Park's face freeze for a moment. The engine thrust you quoted seems different from the specifications I reviewed. Ah, well. Park shuffled through his papers. These technical details. Perhaps we should focus on the luxury features. The leather seats are hand-stitched in Italy. Du-Han stood up suddenly. I'd like to see the actual aircraft now. Of course. Park jumped up. Though I should mention, we require proof of funds before any physical viewing. Standard procedure, you understand. Perhaps you could provide your bank's contact information. Call this number. Du-Han handed him a business card. It's my financial advisor at Swiss National Bank. She's expecting your call. As Park stepped out to make the call, Du-Han walked to the window. In the reflection, he could see Lee Mi-rae watching him with concern. She seemed to be writing something. Du-Han smiled slightly. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. This visit to elite aviation wasn't just about buying a private jet. Du-Han had spent months preparing for this day. Every dismissive look, every condescending comment, every subtle and not so subtle sign of prejudice was being recorded and documented. Park Jin-woo and elite aviation had no idea that they were part of a much larger investigation. Du-Han heard Park returning, his footsteps quick and excited. The bank confirmation had obviously gone well. Now the real work would begin. Du-Han turned around, his face professionally neutral. Shall we see the aircraft, Mr. Park? Park bowed slightly, gesturing toward the door. Right this way, Mr. Kang. I apologize for any delay. We treat security very seriously here at Elite Aviation. As they walked toward the hangar, Du-Han thought about all the others who had faced similar treatment but lacked the power to do anything about it. By the end of this day, things would begin to change. But for now, he simply followed Park, watching, listening, and recording everything. The hangar doors opened slowly, revealing the massive Gulfstream G650 gleaming in the sunlight. It was an impressive aircraft, Du-Han had to admit. But he wasn't here for the jet. He was here for justice, served cold and calculated, with evidence that would be impossible to ignore. Beautiful, isn't it? Park said proudly, as if he had built the aircraft himself. Now, about the payment terms. Du-Han smiled slightly. Payment terms would be the least of Park Jin-woo's concerns very soon. Yes, he said calmly. Let's discuss those terms in detail. The morning was just beginning, and Du-Han had a long day ahead of him. The real story was about to unfold, and he was perfectly prepared for every moment of it. The massive hangar echoed with their footsteps as Kang Du-Han walked around the Gulfstream G650. The morning sun streamed through the high windows, making the white aircraft shine. Park Jin-woo followed closely, watching Du-Han's every move with nervous energy. The leather seats, as I mentioned, are Italian-made, Park said, opening the aircraft's door. Though perhaps you're more familiar with other materials. Du-Han turned slowly. I'm familiar with Loro piano leather. My office chairs are custom-made with it. He watched Park's face twitch with surprise. Shall we discuss the engine specifications now? Inside the aircraft, Park kept touching things nervously, adjusting seat positions, opening and closing compartments. His phone buzzed again. He had been receiving messages constantly since verifying Doohan's finances. Your bank confirms everything, of course, Park said quickly. Though it's unusual, impressive, how quickly you've acquired such wealth. Your people must be very good with numbers. Doohan sat in one of the passenger seats, taking notes on his tablet. My people. Tech people, of course. Park laughed nervously. Silicon Valley types. Now, about the entertainment system. The door of the hangar opened, and Lee Mira walked in, carrying a folder. Mr. Park, I have the technical specifications you requested. Park frowned. Ms. Lee, we're in the middle of an important meeting. Actually, Doohan said, I'd like to see those specifications. He had noticed something odd about the engine numbers Park had quoted earlier. Mireille handed the folder to Doohan directly, ignoring Park's glare. I've highlighted the recent maintenance records and performance tests. Doohan opened the folder and began reading. His eyes narrowed slightly. Mr. Park, these numbers don't match what you showed me earlier. Park tried to take the folder. Oh, these must be outdated. They're from yesterday, Mayray said firmly. I ran the tests myself. Ms. Lee, Park's voice was sharp now. You're dismissed. We can discuss your behavior later. Doohan held up his hand. She stays. I have questions about these test results. He turned to Mireille. The fuel efficiency is 15% lower than advertised. Why? Mireille straightened her glasses. The previous owner modified the engines. It wasn't documented in the sales materials, but I found the records in our maintenance logs. Park's face had turned red. These are minor technical details. For someone new to aviation, for someone spending $65 million, Doohan interrupted. Every detail matters. He stood up and walked to the cockpit. The flight control system has also been modified. That's not mentioned in your sales documents either. The hangar was quiet except for the sound of Park's phone buzzing again. He checked it quickly, then forced a smile. Mr. Kang, perhaps we could discuss a discount to compensate for these oversights. Oversights. Mireille spoke up. Mr. Park, you told me not to include these details in the sales documents. You said no one would notice. That's enough. Park snapped. He turned to Doohan with an artificial smile. Mr. Kang, let's step into my office. We can discuss this privately, away from staff who don't understand business matters. Doohan remained in the cockpit, examining the controls. Ms. Lee understands perfectly well. The question is, how many other buyers have you given incomplete information to? The hangar door opened again. Kim Yuri walked in quickly, holding more papers. Mr. Park, the bank is asking for your signature on the verification forms. Park waved her away. Not now. Can't you see we're busy? But Yuri didn't leave. Instead, she walked straight to Doohan. Sir, I have something you should see. She handed him a stack of papers. These are copies of our sales records from the past year. I've been keeping track of certain patterns. Park stepped forward. This is unauthorized. Security will escort both of you out immediately. No one is calling security, Doohan said calmly. He began reading through Yuri's documents. They showed a clear pattern. Certain buyers receiving different information, different prices, different treatment, all carefully documented by a quiet receptionist who saw everything. Mireille moved closer to Yuri. I knew you were tracking things too. I saw you making notes. Yuri nodded. Someone had to record it. I just never knew what to do with the information. Park pulled out his phone. This is ridiculous. I'm calling the police. You're all trespassing. The police. Doohan looked up from the papers. Interesting choice. Should we discuss what they might find if they investigate these sales records? Or perhaps we should call the aviation authority about the undisclosed modifications. The color drained from Park's face. He lowered the phone slowly. What do you want? First, Doohan said, I want complete, accurate documentation about this aircraft. Every modification, every test result, every maintenance record. He turned to Mireille. Can you provide those? Mireille nodded firmly. I have everything backed up. Multiple copies. Second, Doohan continued, Ms. Kim will give me copies of all her sales records. They'll make interesting reading for our legal team. Legal team? Park's voice cracked. Surely we can handle this internally. I'm authorized to offer a substantial discount. Third, Doohan went on as if Park hadn't spoken. You're going to sit down and explain exactly how long this has been going on and who authorized it. Park looked around desperately, but he found no sympathy. Mireille and Yuri stood together, straight and determined. Doohan remained in the cockpit, calm and unmovable. You don't understand, Park said finally. This is how things work in this industry. Everyone does it. We just adjust our approach based on the client. Based on what you assume about the client, Doohan corrected. He stepped out of the cockpit. Ms. Lee, how long will it take to compile all the technical documentation? I have most of it ready, Mireille said. I've been keeping separate records for months. Good. Doohan turned to Yuri. And your sales records? Everything's organized by date, she replied. I can have copies ready in an hour. Park slumped against the cabin wall. My career is over. That depends, Doohan said, on how honest you are in the next few hours. He checked his watch. It's almost noon. I suggest we all go to the conference room. We have a lot to discuss. As they walked back to the main building, Park stayed behind, making frantic phone calls. Mireille and Yuri walked together, talking quietly about the records they had kept. Doohan led the way, his tablet recording everything. The morning's confrontation was ending, but Doohan knew the real work was just beginning. The evidence was stronger than he had hoped for, thanks to two brave employees who had been quietly fighting the same battle from the inside. Soon, Park Jin-woo would learn that this was more than just one sale gone wrong. But for now, Doohan let him make his desperate phone calls. Sometimes, the best way to change a system was to let people hang themselves with their own words. The conference room waited ahead, its glass walls reflecting the midday sun. It would be a long afternoon, full of revelations and confessions. Doohan smiled slightly. Everything was going exactly according to plan, and even better than he had expected. The conference room at Elite Aviation felt smaller now, with tension filling the air. Park Jin-woo sat at one end of the long table, his usual confidence gone. Across from him, Kang Doohan connected his tablet to the room's large display screen. Lee Mireille and Kim Yuri sat quietly, their documents spread before them. Before we begin, Doohan said, I should explain why I'm really here. He pressed a button on his tablet, and the screen came to life. Quantum Dynamics has spent the last 6 months investigating discrimination in luxury sales across Europe. Park's head snapped up. Investigation. Yes. Doohan brought up a series of charts and images. We've visited 58 luxury dealers. Cars, planes, yachts. We recorded every interaction. He turned to face Park directly. Elite Aviation ranks among the worst for discriminatory practices. The room grew very quiet. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the glass walls. Employees walked past, glancing curiously at the tense gathering inside. Everything since I walked in this morning has been recorded, Doohan continued. The suggestion that I look at smaller options, the comments about being new to aviation, the hidden aircraft modifications, all of it. Park's face had turned pale. This is a setup. No, Mr. Park, this is accountability. Doohan showed more slides. We have similar recordings from Berlin, Paris, London. The pattern is clear and documented. May Ray leaned forward. That's why you let him keep making those comments. You were building evidence. Exactly. Doohan nodded. But what I didn't expect was to find internal allies. He gestured to the documents May Ray and Uri had provided. Your records make our case even stronger. Uri spoke up softly. I've worked here 3 years. I watched it happen every day. Different prices, different treatment, different rules, all based on how people looked. It's standard practice. Park protested, finding his voice. We have to protect our brand. Our regular clients expect a certain atmosphere. Let's talk about your regular clients. Doohan brought up new data. According to Ms. Kim's records, you've turned away or discouraged dozens of qualified buyers. The lost sales total more than $800 million. The numbers hung on the screen, impossible to ignore. Park stared at them, his mouth opened slightly. Meanwhile, Doohan continued, you've sold aircraft with undisclosed modifications to other buyers. Ms. Lee's technical records show a pattern of hiding important information, but only from certain customers. May Ray stood up and walked to the screen. I can explain the technical violations in detail. I have documentation for each case. Park's phone buzzed again. He reached for it desperately, but Doohan shook his head. I wouldn't answer that yet. There's more. The screen changed to show a new image, a corporate structure chart. Elite Aviation's logo sat at the bottom, connected by lines to larger companies above it. 1 hour ago, Doohan said calmly, Quantum Dynamics completed its purchase of a controlling interest in Global Aerospace Holdings. He paused as Park's face showed recognition. Your parent company. The phone slipped from Park's hand and clattered on the table. You bought our company. The paperwork was finalized during our aircraft tour. Doohan smiled slightly. While you were checking my bank references, my legal team was closing the deal in London. May Ray gasped. That means... Yes, Doohan nodded. As of noon today, I effectively own Elite Aviation, and my first action as owner will be a complete investigation of all sales practices. Park jumped to his feet. You can't do this. I have contracts, protections. Your contract, Doohan said firmly, includes clear language about discriminatory practices being grounds for immediate termination. Ms. Kim, could you share the relevant documents? Uri pulled out a folder and began laying out papers. Section 8, Paragraph 4 specifically addresses fair treatment of all potential customers. The afternoon light made the documents glow on the dark table. Park stared at them, then at his silent phone, then at the corporate chart still showing on the screen. What do you want? He asked finally, his voice barely a whisper. The truth, Doohan replied. Every case, every incident, every policy. Written down and signed. And if I refuse, then we take our evidence to the media. The recordings, the documents, the technical violations, all of it. Doohan's voice remained calm. Your choice, Mr. Park. May Ray opened her laptop. I can begin documenting the technical violations now. I have all the maintenance records organized by date. Good, Doohan said. Ms. Kim, please prepare a summary of the sales incidents you've recorded. Mr. Park will verify each one. Park sank back into his chair. How long have you been planning this? 8 months, Doohan answered. After I was turned away from 3 different jet dealers in 1 week. Each time, they suggested I might prefer smaller options. He looked directly at Park. I decided then that buying the companies would be simpler than fighting them one by one. The revelation hung in the air. Park looked broken, his carefully maintained image crumbling. May Ray and Uri worked steadily, organizing their evidence. Doohan watched it all, his tablet still recording. The press release goes out at 9 tomorrow morning, he said. You have until then to provide a complete statement. Every incident, every policy, every decision. If you're honest, there might be a path forward for you in the new organization. And if I'm not, Park asked. Then the recordings go public. Doohan stood up. Your reputation, your career, your future in this industry, all of it ends tomorrow. Your choice. He walked to the window. The afternoon sun was starting to fade, casting golden light across the airfield. In the distance, the Gulfstream G650 gleamed in its hangar. Start writing, Mr. Park, Doohan said without turning around. We'll be here as long as it takes. The sound of papers shuffling filled the room. Park picked up a pen with trembling fingers and began to write. The truth, hidden for so long, was finally coming to light. Tomorrow, everything would change. But for now, they sat in that quiet room, documenting years of discrimination, one page at a time. The revelation was complete. The real work of transformation was about to begin. Evening had fallen over Geneva when the first news alerts started appearing on phones throughout elite aviation. The message was clear and shocking. Tech giant Quantum Dynamics acquires Global Aerospace Holdings in surprise move. Park Jin-woo sat in his office, his confession now 20 pages long. His computer screen showed dozens of urgent emails from corporate headquarters. Outside his door, employees gathered in small groups, whispering and checking their phones. Kang Doohan watched it all from the conference room, where Lee Mi-rae and Kim Yuri continued organizing their evidence. The glass walls gave them a perfect view of the growing chaos in the office. Mr. Kang, a voice called from the doorway. A group of men in suits had arrived. The company's legal team from London. We need to discuss the transition. Doohan nodded. Of course. Please come in. He turned to Mi-rae and Yuri. Would you both stay? Your evidence will be important for this discussion. The lawyers spread their documents across the table. As they talked, more people joined the meeting. Human resources executives appeared on video calls. Corporate officers dialed in from different time zones. The small conference room had become the center of a corporate earthquake. The evidence is overwhelming, the head lawyer said, reviewing Mi-rae's technical documents. Systematic discrimination, hidden aircraft modifications, altered sales records. This goes beyond one office. It's in every office. Yuri spoke up. She opened her files on the computer. I've been sharing information with receptionists in Paris, London, and Berlin. We all saw the same patterns. The HR director's voice came through the speakers. Mr. Park's position is, of course, terminated effective immediately, but we need to think about the other employees involved. I have suggestions about that, Doohan said. He pressed a button on his tablet, and a new document appeared on the main screen. A complete reorganization plan, starting with Elite Aviation's Geneva office. The document showed a new corporate structure. At the top of the sales department was Lee Mi-rae's name. Next to it, a new position, Corporate Ethics Officer, Kim Yuri. Mi-rae stared at the screen. Me? Head of Sales. You understand both the technical and human aspects of this business, Doohan explained. More importantly, you showed integrity when it was difficult to do so. Yuri looked at her new title with wide eyes. Ethics Officer. Your detailed records show exactly what this company needs to change, Doohan said. Who better to lead that change than someone who documented the problem so carefully? The lawyers began updating their papers. The HR team started drafting new contracts. Outside the conference room, the whispers had turned to loud discussions as more employees saw the news. Park appeared in the doorway, holding his confession papers. His face was gray with exhaustion. I've written everything. Every incident, every policy, every decision I made. Thank you, Doohan said. Please give those to Ms. Kim. She'll be reviewing all past incidents in her new role as ethics officer. Park's hands shook as he handed over the papers. What happens to me now? That depends on what's in those papers, Doohan replied. Complete honesty might mean a chance at rehabilitation. Anything less. He let the sentence hang unfinished. As Park left the room, looking broken, a new group arrived. Television crews had gathered outside the building, alerted by the corporate announcement. Reporters were requesting statements. "Mr. Kang," one of the lawyers said, "we should prepare a press release." "Already done." Doohan showed them another document on his tablet. "We'll announce the acquisition, the leadership changes, and our new corporate ethics policies all at once." Mei Ray read through the press release. "You're using my technical findings as evidence." "With your permission." Doohan nodded. "Your documentation of aircraft modifications proves this wasn't just about discrimination in sales. It was about systematic deception." The lawyers began making calls to PR firms. The HR team started drafting company-wide announcements. Through the glass walls, they could see more employees arriving, drawn by the news despite the late hour. "Ms. Lee," Doohan said, "I think it's time for your first action as head of sales." He pointed to the Gulfstream G650, visible in its hangar through the office windows. "That aircraft needs a complete technical review and a new accurate sales listing." Mei Ray straightened her glasses, smiling. "I'll start right away, with the real specifications this time. And Ms. Kim," he turned to Yuri, "please begin organizing ethics training sessions for all sales staff. Use your records to show them exactly what needs to change." Yuri nodded firmly. "I know exactly which examples to use." The night grew deeper, but the office stayed bright and busy. News crews set up their cameras outside. Corporate executives continued calling in from around the world. Lawyers drafted documents, PR teams prepared statements, and HR worked on the restructuring plan. In the middle of it all, Doohan stood at the window, watching his plan unfold. The quiet tech billionaire who had walked in that morning looking to buy a jet had transformed into the owner who would reshape the entire industry. "Sir," Mei Ray approached him, holding a tablet. "I finished the initial review of the Gulfstream. Would you like to be my first official customer?" Doohan turned to her with a small smile. "I would be honored. But this time, let's go through every specification, every detail, exactly as they should have done this morning." As they walked toward the hangar, Doohan could see his reflection in the glass walls. The same man who had been judged and dismissed hours ago now owned the entire company. But the real victory wasn't in the ownership. It was in the change that was already beginning. The tables had turned completely, and tomorrow would bring even more changes. The story of what happened at Elite Aviation would soon spread through the entire industry. The message would be clear. Discrimination had a price, and that price could be very high indeed. 6 months had passed since the day Kang Doohan walked into Elite Aviation. The company's Geneva office looked very different now. Gone were the intimidating glass barriers and exclusive private areas. Instead, the showroom welcomed all visitors with clear pricing displays and detailed technical information for each aircraft. Mei Ray stood in her office, now marked Head of Sales, reviewing the latest sales figures. Under her leadership, Elite Aviation had sold more aircraft in 6 months than in the previous 2 years combined. Her policy of complete transparency about specifications and pricing had earned the trust of customers worldwide. "Ms. Lee," her assistant called from the door. "Mr. Kang has arrived for the quarterly review." Doohan walked in, dressed in his usual simple suit. Despite now owning the company, he hadn't changed his modest way of dressing or his careful manner of speaking. He sat down as Mei Ray prepared her presentation. "Our new sales approach is working better than expected," she began, showing him the numbers. "When we tell customers everything about the aircraft, even small problems, they trust us more. They buy more." Doohan nodded, examining the figures. "And the technical transparency program. Every aircraft now comes with complete documentation," Mei Ray explained. "No more hidden modifications, no more surprises." She smiled. "It turns out telling the truth is good business." Kim Yuri joined them, carrying her latest ethics report. As corporate ethics officer, she had transformed how Elite Aviation treated its customers and employees. Her desk, once a place where she quietly documented discrimination, was now the center of the company's integrity programs. "The changes are spreading," Yuri reported. "Other luxury sellers are copying our transparency policies. They see our success and want to follow our example." Duhan looked pleased. "And our former sales director, Park Jin-woo, completed his rehabilitation program last week," Yuri said. "His confession helped us identify similar problems in other offices. Now he speaks at industry events about changing discriminatory practices." The morning sun filled the office as they talked. Through the window, they could see new customers arriving. People of all backgrounds, all receiving the same professional treatment. The days of quick judgments and hidden prejudices were over. "There's someone here to see you," Mayray said to Duhan. "A special customer." They walked to the showroom, where Park Jin-woo stood waiting. He looked different now, humbler, more genuine. The arrogance that had marked his previous position was gone. "Mr. Kang," Park bowed slightly, "I came to thank you. What you did, it didn't just change the company. It changed me." Duhan studied him carefully. "Tell me how." "I've spent 6 months thinking about every person I treated unfairly," Park said. "I've called many of them personally to apologize. Some even became customers under Ms. Lee's leadership." They walked together through the showroom. Park pointed out the changes. The clear pricing signs, the detailed technical displays, the welcoming atmosphere. His voice carried genuine pride in the transformation. "We're launching the industry's first fair sales practice certification," Yuri explained. "Other companies want to learn from our experience." Duhan stopped at the window, looking out at the aircraft on display. Among them sat his Gulfstream G650, the one he had finally bought from Mireille, after a completely transparent sale process. "Mr. Park," Duhan said, "you once suggested I look at smaller options. What would you say to a customer like me today?" Park's face showed shame at the memory, but he answered honestly. "Today, I would ask about their needs, their plans, their technical requirements. I would show them every option that matches those needs, regardless of who they are. And if someone like me walked in now, they would see the same prices, get the same information, and receive the same respect as anyone else," Park replied. "Because that's not just our policy, it's who we are now." Mayray stepped forward with a document. "We're ready to expand the transparency program to all our offices worldwide. The board has approved the funding." Duhan signed the paper without hesitation. "This was always about more than buying a jet," he said. "It was about changing how business is done." Yuri checked her tablet. "The morning training session is about to start. Mr. Park, would you like to share your story with the new sales team?" Park nodded. "They should know what happened here. They should understand why these changes matter." As they walked to the training room, Duhan thought about that first morning 6 months ago. His plan had worked better than he had expected, not just changing policies but changing people. Elite Aviation had become a model for the industry, proving that fairness and success could go hand in hand. "One last thing," Mayray said, handing him a file. "The latest sales figures show something interesting. Our customer base is more diverse than ever, but our profits are at record levels." Duhan smiled. "Because when you treat everyone with respect, everyone wants to do business with you." Park finished the sentence. "I understand that now." The training room was full of new employees, eager to learn. Through the windows, they could see aircraft taking off and landing. Each one sold with complete honesty, each customer treated with equal respect. The transformation was complete, but its effects would continue to spread. What had started as one man's response to discrimination had become a movement for change throughout the industry. The story of elite aviation would be taught in business schools, showing how integrity and success could work together. Duhan took his seat at the back of the training room, watching as Park began to tell his story. The former sales director's voice was clear and honest as he described his journey from prejudice to understanding. In the audience, faces showed recognition and determination. a new generation of sales professionals learning to do business the right way. The morning sun filled the room with light, touching everything with gold. Outside, a new day of fair and honest business was beginning. The private jet incident had changed more than just one company. It had started a transformation that would ripple through the entire industry, one honest sale at a time. The end was really just another beginning.